It's Jurgen Klopp versus Pep Guardiola.
On the Plot Malaysia.
Hello, welcome to the Plot Malaysia. This is our 79th episode. This is the show for the fans.
By the fans.
Woohoo! Whoa. Today is going to be an exciting episode because we will be talking about Jurgen Klopp versus Pep Guardiola. So it's going to go head to head, of course, with the two, I think, declared as the two best managers of the Premier League so far. I mean, of course,
Probably in world football. Probably in world football. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm sure Hari is excited about this. But we're not going to do this alone. Okay. We do have a very special guest all the way from India. I'm sure you've seen him on the show as well. He's back to join us. So let's welcome none other than Harshal Patel.
Hey.
Hello.
Harshal, welcome back.
Welcome
Thank
back,
you. Thank you
Harshal.
for having
Good to
me.
have you on. Absolutely no problem
Thank
at
you.
all.
I mean, it was fantastic. The first show with you was really insightful, Harshal. So
Thank you.
obviously we had to extend that show and we had to push the topic of the second
Yeah.
topic of that show to another date. And we thought there was no better time of doing this than during the international break. Obviously,
Yep.
everyone's off. Everyone can't watch Premier League action. So I think it's time to get into some nitty-gritty and into tactics and formations, etc. And no better time to do it than the international break itself. So looking forward to this session, guys. What we're going to do is it's going to be a chat with Harshal, who's a football analyst based out of India. He's worked, as he mentioned in the previous episode, with clubs as well, professional clubs in Europe as well. He's done some work for them before as well. What we're going to do, we're going to break down Klopp's system and formation and tactics and how his teams work as opposed to Pep Guardiola. So regarded as the two best managers in world football, we're going to break it down. We're going to differentiate the two ways of working, the two systems, and the different ways in which the two teams work and set up systematically as well. So really looking forward to this, Harshal.
Yep, same here. It's quite interesting to look at both of them because they've actually sort of over the years, and they've obviously come to the Premier League in the last 5 to 7 years. But before that, they've gone head to head in the Bundesliga as well. When Klopp was manager of Dortmund and Pep was Bayern Munich manager. And they've actually learned and taken stuff from each other's game a little bit as well. Some of their clashes in the Champions League, in the Bundesliga and all of that have actually, led one of them to pick up stuff that the other was doing and vice versa. So it's quite interesting if you look at the history of these two. And yeah, as you said, Hari, probably the two best managers in the world right now, to be honest. And they've dominated the Premier League as well. City have won 3 of the last 4 titles. Liverpool have won the other one. And I believe it was 3 seasons ago when City won the title by 1 point. They got 98 points. Liverpool got 97. So
Liverpool won the Champions League that year. Yep.
Exactly. So Liverpool and City have easily been 2 of the best teams in England and in Europe. And and I'd say obviously the biggest reason for that is these two managers. So it's quite fascinating if you look at the way they set up and what their philosophies is, because as I said, they have learned a little bit from each other and they have taken things from each other's game, but they are also very distinct and they have their own way of playing, which is quite different from each other. So those similarities and differences are things that will be interesting to look at.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it, actually.
Looking forward to it, actually. So let's get straight into it then, guys. I mean, obviously, both managers are famed for their pressing, but I know the different forms of pressing, and I think we're going to dig into that. We're going to dig, obviously, into the patterns of play. Obviously, one manager is known for his possession-based football. One is known for Jurgen pressing and breaking at speed. So I'm sure we're going to dig into that with you, Harshal. So let's get started. I don't know who you're going to start with. You're going to start with City's approach under Pep or Liverpool's approach under Klopp?
Let's go with City for no other reason that they're the defending champions in the Premier League. No other reason.
Okay.
So, okay, now before I have a few images and I will also, run you guys through a little bit of an animation in the sense that on a tactical board, I'll sort of move things around and show stuff. But before I get into that, just like a very short, I wouldn't say history, but like an overview of Pep's style of play as such, which has
Sure.
largely remained consistent since his Barcelona days. So Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City, it's more or less been consistent, but he has adapted and evolved his game to suit both the clubs that he's been at and the league he's been because obviously three different clubs in three different leagues. So, like for example, when he started out at Barcelona, he had arguably, I think, the best club side of all time, which he obviously helped build. But you've got uh, players like Xavi, Iniesta, Messi, excuse me, Gerard Piqué, even Victor Valdez in goal, for example. Valdez was fantastic at playing the ball out from the back, in addition
Yep.
to being a very good goalkeeper as well. And then you have, Thierry Henry initially. He had David Villa. Pedro came through the academy and was put into the team. Sergio Busquets, who, Pep basically brought him with him. So Pep was manager of the Barcelona B side before he took over as the manager of the senior team. And he brought Busquets with him. And this like 18, 19-year-old kid became one of the best defensive midfielders the game has ever seen. And a large part of that, obviously, due to his own talent, but also through Pep's, tutoring
Brilliant.
and the way he told him, the way in which he developed his game. So at Barcelona, it's quite interesting if you look back at that they used to sort of monopolize possession 60
Yep.
65%. And I mean, United fans will have painful memories of that because they've defeated United twice in Champions League
Yep.
finals,
Yep.
2009 and 2011. And
Yep.
the 2000 and the 2011 final is probably the most sort of complete performance I've seen from a team.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Even
I
though,
agree.
yes,
And the,
United
the
did
one at
score a
Wembley.
goal.
That was the one at Wembley, wasn't it? Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
United did score. The scoreline was 3-1, but they could barely lay a glove on Barcelona. The
Yep.
way Barcelona kept the ball, passed around United, it was fantastic. And it all boils down to the positions that Pep wants his players to take up on the pitch, the risks that he's willing to take to do that, because you have, it's not an ultra attacking approach, but in the sense that it's not like you're pouring players forward, but there are maybe, if you say there are 10 outfield players, maybe about 6 to 7 easily attacking, sometimes
Yep.
8. But that was during his Barcelona days, because in La Liga, counter-attacking is not as prevalent as it is in the Bundesliga and in the Premier League.
Premier
So
League.
you can maybe, at least 10 years ago, it changed a little bit now, but 10 years ago when Pep was at Barcelona, a lot of Spanish sides tended to play in a possession-based way. Which, what I'm trying to say by that is that when they would regain the ball, they wouldn't necessarily attack quickly. They would also sort of recycle possession, play it around, which allowed the
Yep.
opposition to get back into shape. It wasn't.
Got it.
There
Yep.
would obviously be times when they would counterattack, quickly, but that's a lot less than in the Bundesliga and in Spain. And in England. So could almost afford to maybe have one extra player attacking and have just the two centre backs and one full back staying back, or the two centre backs and the defensive midfielder staying back, at times another full back. But when he came to the Bundesliga, he's spoken about this. Like there's a book called Pep Confidential by Marti Pernerau, which I recommend to anybody who wants to know about Pep, because Marti Pernerau, he got like an unprecedented level of access to Pep during his first year at Bayern Munich. So this was, I believe, the 2013-14 season, right after Bayern won the treble. Pep came in, replaced Jupp Heynckes, and Bernardo got access to all the players. He was allowed on the training pitch. He was allowed to talk to Pep, the coaches, all of that. And the account of that first season is in that book, Pep Confidential. And
Awesome. Yep.
there, Pep talks about how Dortmund, for example, were one of the most frightening teams to face, and Dortmund were known at that time under Jurgen Klopp for their gegenpressing. Now, gegenpressing is a German term which means counter pressing. Now, what is the difference between pressing and counter pressing? Pressing is simply, say, if I'm looking at two random teams, say Manchester City versus Manchester United. United have the ball, City don't have the ball, obviously. And what are City doing when United don't have the ball? When United are building up from the back, for example, the press in terms of the pressure they're applying, the positions they're taking up in order to try and win the ball back. counter pressing is what do you do right after you've lost the ball. So say if City lose the ball in wherever it may be on the pitch, whether it's in their own half, the middle third, or the attacking third, what do you do when you lose the ball immediately in say the 5 to 7, 8 seconds after you've lost the ball? Do you immediately go on the hunt to win it back, or do you
Or do
sort
you
of
fall back into
drop
shape?
back? Exactly. And gegenpressing has been the sort of hallmark of Jurgen Klopp's uh, approach, and that was something that worked really well against Pep's teams, or I wouldn't say really well against Pep's teams, but it sort of matched up really well because obviously Pep's teams like to dominate possession. Dortmund was City were happy to sit back and sort of you know let Bayern have the ball, but when they would sort of, but when Dortmund would have the ball, and if they would lose the ball, it would be a swarm of players around the Bayern Munich players trying to win the ball back immediately, and then counter attack because. And Klopp has said this. He says that the best playmaker in the game is gegenpressing,
Yeah.
because the moment when you lose the ball is the moment when you're the most sort of disorganized in that sense. No, actually, that's the wrong way to put it. The moment when you regain possession. So, say if you're looking at Bayern Munich versus Dortmund in this case, when Bayern have the ball, they've lost the ball. When Dortmund have the ball, they've lost the ball to Bayern. Bayern is still trying to figure out what to do with the ball, right? I mean, I've got the ball. You've have the ball. I've tackled you. I've got the ball. It'll take me a second, 2 seconds maybe to figure out. Okay, I need to make the next pass here. I'm here. My teammates here. I need to make the next pass here. Even if it takes 1 second, that 1 second is enough for the opposition because in that 1 second you don't know what you're doing. You're uncertain, and that is what gegenpressing exploits by having your players in positions where, okay, I've got the ball. I'm going to make the pass here, but you've cut out that passing lane, so I win the ball back. I'm going to pass here. You've cut out that passing lane, so I'm going to win the ball back. Or I'm just going to quickly, like if you're right in front of me, I'm going to sort of get in and win the ball back. And this usually takes place in the final third. So if I
Yep.
win the ball back in the final third, I'm already advanced up the pitch. I'm already in a dangerous position, and I can create an attack from there rather than winning the ball in front of my own penalty area. Even if I do
Yep.
that, and it's obviously important to do that to halt opposition attacks, I still need to get the ball to the opposition's penalty area. But if I win the ball back near the opposition's penalty area, I can create a chance much quicker and much more easily because the defense are also disorganized. So that
Yep.
approach that Klopp's teams have had sort of rattled Pep in a way where if you go back and look at the Dortmund Bayern clashes, Dortmund actually gave Bayern a lot of trouble in that time. And Pep has spoken about how Dortmund were a huge competitor and a big reason for why his Bayern team also did well because there was a team that was pushing them that hard. But my wider point here was that Pep adapted. He did try and play a slightly more direct style of play. In his second season at Bayern, they got Robert Lewandowski from Dortmund. So Lewandowski also had to adapt to the way Pep wanted to play. So it took some time for him to adapt. I mean, Lewandowski is one of the best strikers in Europe over the last 10 years, right? But even a player like Lewandowski had to adapt to the way Pep plays because he has such specific demands of his players, especially out of possession, because
Yep.
he needs everybody to press. You can't be a bystander. You can't be like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to run around a little bit. But you need to press. You need to do it intelligently. So Lewandowski took a while to adapt, but Pep also adapted to Lewandowski. He did try and play a slightly more direct style of play to suit Lewandowski's strengths a little bit, to suit Ian Robin, Frank Ribery's strengths a little bit. So it was a little bit of a compromise. Not too much. He's still very strict on the way he wants to play, but he made a few tweaks there. And then he comes to Manchester City in the Premier League. And if you remember, I think City finished. I think they finished fourth in his first season, if I'm not wrong. And
Yep. Fourth it was. Yep.
and he in that season he was still trying to figure out obviously how the Premier League works and he's spoken about this, about how it was a bit of a shock to him in terms of just how much emphasis there is on second balls in the Premier League. So second balls are basically if after a long ball or after any sort of pass and the ball breaks, what happens then? Do you
Yeah.
in terms of if it's a long ball, I don't win the first that first
Who wins the
conflict
second?
of
Who wins the second
Who
ball?
wins the second
Basically,
ball?
who
Yeah.
wins the
second ball?
second ball makes a huge difference in the Premier League. That's not the case in other leagues, and he was very surprised by that. He's spoken about this, about how he was surprised at the intensity and the and the way in which that emphasis was placed on the Premier League. He's spoken about how he doesn't coach tackles. He said this: I don't coach tackles or tackling, but again, the Premier League is a physical league. The refereeing is a lot more lenient as well. A lot more fouls, or a lot more challenges, which would have been fouls in other leagues or would have been fouls in the Champions League, are not given as fouls in the Premier League. So he had to get used to all of that. He had to work with fullbacks like Gael Clichy or like Alexander Kolarov, and I believe Bakary Sanya in his first year, who aren't suited to the way he wanted to play. So that first season was a season of adaptation. And then if you remember, he went out and spent a boatload of money on fullbacks. And
Yep.
everybody was like, why are you spending 50 million on Kyle Walker? Why are you spending, he spent about 50 odd million on Benjamin Mendy as well
Mendy,
later on.
yep.
Cancelo, when he was bought a couple of seasons ago, was another 57 odd million or something. So,
Yep.
and people will think, well, that's the sort of fee you pay for like attacking midfielders or strikers. Fullbacks going for 50, 60 million, but it's because fullbacks are so essential to the way Pep plays, especially in terms of build up and all of that. So once he got his preferred players, and when I say preferred players, I mean in terms of the profile, in terms of their style of play, in terms of their strengths. And then you saw him take the Premier League by storm. He's won the last four titles. He's won three of the last four titles in England. So
Yep.
that just tells you that for everybody who said, oh, there's always these things when anybody comes from a league outside of England as to whether they can adapt to England. Can he do it in the Premier League? Can he do it on a cold Tuesday night at Stoke City?
Stoke
So
City.
all these stereotypes have been broken massively. Look at the way City play, and look at the way so many other teams play as based on how City play. Like one of the best examples I can think of is Brighton. Brighton are what they just about avoided relegation last season under Graham Potter, but they're a really good footballing side. I really enjoy watching Brighton. The football they play, the way they build up, the way they sustain attacks, patterns of play, positioning of the players, it's all borrowed from the sort of Guardiola model. And Pep has been one of the most influential managers in the history of the game because his style of play, since going back from the Barcelona days up till now, has influenced managers all across the world. There are so many teams who try to play in that same way. And he's shown that he can do it in multiple countries, Spain, Germany, and in England. Obviously, the one sort of black mark that's put against him is that he's not won the Champions League with a team other than Barcelona, but they came extremely close over the summer. And I am pretty sure that before he leaves City, he will win a Champions League with them, whenever that may be, whether in the next 2 or 3 seasons. Because the style of play is just that good and that consistent, that repeatable. I think Bernardo Silva was talking just about last week or something about how it doesn't, like, obviously injuries do play a part, and when key players are out injured, it affects any team. But with a team like City, who have such fixed roles for players, you can almost plug and play. Okay, so and so player isn't available, we'll play him. He'll play the same role, and we'll more or less get the same result. So when you have such defined roles and such defined ways of play, it becomes automatic, and then that elevates players, and then obviously individual ability comes into the play. So if you've got a very good player playing in such a good system, you already sort of elevate his strengths, and then that extra 10, 15%, 5%, whatever it may be, comes from that player's own ability, which obviously Pep has some world-class players at his disposal. So what the point of this whole sort of introduction or whatever was that he's got a very good, solid system behind him. And then when you add, which he's adapted as well, it's not like he's rigid, he's adapted to the clubs, to the players and the countries he's playing in. And when on
Yep.
top of that you add world-class players, it takes a lot to stop a Pep Guardiola team. It's not easy.
Totally agree.
No,
Totally
I
agree.
100%,
It's
So-
100%
scary.
agree. And to be honest, one of the things, I'm sure Ram will come to this as well, but one of the things, and I'm sure you're going to show this to us now as well, Harshal, so we can dig deeper into it. But how the fullbacks play basically in a Pep's team. Very different to the way a traditional fullback plays. They come into midfield. So I'm sure we'll be able to show this visually as well. So viewers have an idea, guys. But
Yep.
how this actually works in a Pep Guardiola team is very interesting to dig deeper into.
Yeah, so I'm now just going to share my screen and show you guys a few images to sort of illustrate what you just said about their build up and about what the fullbacks do and that sort of thing. So, is this visible?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so City are in blue over here,
Yep.
opposition's in red.
Yep.
This is sort of, let's say, the sort of build-up that we've been seeing from City this season. This isn't something that they've been doing over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I'll explain what I'm talking about here. So if you look at the fullbacks here, you've got number 3 and number 2 as the fullbacks.
Oh wow, very
So
interesting.
when
This
City
is just to clarify one thing here, Harshal, before you go on further. This is when they're in
Yeah.
possession of the ball, right?
yeah, so I don't have a ball over here, but let's assume
Yeah.
the keeper has the ball over here.
Okay, got it.
So when the ball is in their defensive third, or when they're basically trying to build out from the back, one thing that they've done this season which they didn't do last season was that both fullbacks, so number 2, number 3, if you're looking at number 2 and number 3 as fullbacks, both of them are coming into midfield.
Yep.
Over the last 2 seasons, you'd see one of them come into midfield and the other one stay wide. But so yeah, okay, this one's a better image to show because you've got a ball over here and I've got a couple of arrows done as well. So as I was saying, so if say the number 4 Americ Laporte has the ball over here, both your fullbacks are coming into midfield and the width is being maintained high up the pitch by the wingers. And this is something that you will always see with the Pep Guardiola team. The wingers stay wide on the touchline, no matter whether they're true wingers or inverted wingers, in the sense that even if it's say a Riyad Mahrez who's playing on the right but he's left-footed, even then he will stay out wide in the initial phases. Raheem Sterling, right-footed, playing on the left, he will stay wide. They will only come inside later on when the ball is in the middle third or the final third. But in the build-up phase, they stay wide. And the point of this is to stretch the opposition. Because if I am staying wide, if my wingers are wide, the opposition fullbacks, they have 2 options. Now, either they also come wide, which leaves gaps between them and the centre-backs, or they choose to
which
stay
can be
narrow.
exploited, by the attacking midfielders,
Exactly.
basically, right?
The half spaces. So
Yep.
if you look at the image I've drawn here, you can see I've got dotted lines from the edge of the penalty area going across the pitch and from the edge of the 6-yard box going across the pitch. So this is something that divides the pitch into 5 sort of zones, and the 2 sort of zones which are, so you've got the big sort of central zone, and then the 2 zones that are that are just next to them, which are from the edge of the 6-yard box to the edge of the penalty area in terms of width. Those 2 zones are basically known as a half space. And the half space is, I mean, every manager, in terms of the way they play or in terms of chance creation, they want to try and get their players on the ball in the half spaces, because those are the areas where the opposition is left in, they need to make a decision as to whether who's the player who goes out to press, who's the player who stays back. And I'll illustrate this later on as well. But just over here, if you look, because the wingers stay wide, either the fullbacks have to come out, which means that there are gaps between the fullback and the centre back in those half spaces, or the defense stays narrow, in which case the wingers will be free to receive the ball, because by the time they receive the ball, they'll have the time to turn and run by the time the opposition fullback comes across, because the fullbacks are staying narrow. So
essentially you're caught in a situation as a defensive team, which is either you stay narrow and you give lots of space basically to the wingers like Sterling, Grealish, for example, even Mahrez, or you push out wide to them, your fullbacks, and then you leave a lot of space for people like Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne, etc., to exploit in the half spaces.
Exactly.
Right? Or Gundogan to exploit in the half spaces.
Exactly. And that's the sort of decision that it's obviously a very tricky one for teams to make, and the different teams have different ways of combating that. But it's just the fact that the setup that City have automatically forces you to make this decision, that you need to do this. or rather, you need to choose one way right from the outset. And coming back to this image, um, as I said, this season we're seeing both fullbacks stuck in, and one of the reasons for this is to guard against counterattacks. So when the ball moves up, you'll still see the two fullbacks stays fairly central. One of them might go out wide, but both of them usually stay central along with the two centre backs, and then you have a defensive midfielder. So then you've got 5 players sort of in central areas, so that even if one of your attacks breaks down and the opposition counter, you've got 5 players back, or rather, you've got 5 players in central positions to guard against counter attacks. That either
So
forces
so
the
so
opposition
so
into wider areas.
so essentially, what they're doing is they're able to get another attacking player in the sense that Gundogan can push up with the license to push up, as opposed to stay back a little bit, because your fullbacks are the one that are providing the cover centrally defensively. Is that what it means? Essentially, is that why they do it?
To an extent, yes, that is basically what they were doing last season with Cancelo, with Joao
Yep.
Cancelo sort of playing at left back, but in possession he was playing almost as a central midfielder, as an attacking midfielder at times, and
Yep.
that gave Gundogan the license to go forward, and he scored. He was their highest scorer last season.
Yep.
But this, yes, this does also allow the two sort of number 10s in that sense. So if City are playing a 4-3-3, if you've got Fernandinho or Rodri as the defensive midfielder, and then you'll usually have, when everybody's fit, say you'll have
De
Kevin De
Bruyne
Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, say, as the two attacking central midfielders,
or
but they are
Foden. Yeah. Yep.
essentially
Yep.
they're essentially playing as two number 10s. And
Yep.
earlier it was David Silva, so it used to be David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne as two number 10s floating around in those half spaces, making it difficult for the opposition to decide who's going to mark, whether it's going to be the central midfielder, the centre back, and in terms of the striker as well. It's not exactly a false nine, but the striker is also someone who gets involved in the build up. He'll drop deep, and then he'll again sort of run in behind. And again, so if we were to move this on a little bit further, say when City have the ball even
In
further
the
up the
third.
pitch, look at, so you've got, say, the defensive midfielder dropping in here. You've got the two centre backs. This is actually probably a situation with City are sort of almost ultra attacking because both fullbacks are out wide. Usually, you'll probably see one of the fullbacks tucked in
Tuck
and
in,
forming
yeah.
a back four.
Yep.
But this is also something they've been doing where the fullback sort of both fullbacks go wide, and Kyle Walker's role in this in this sort of situation, or just in general, Kyle Walker has been one of the most important players to City's style of play under Guardiola, because he's capable of tucking inside and playing as a third centre back when City have the ball, but he's also has the pace to play as a proper right back and overlap. And
Yep.
when he plays as a third centre back, he's the one who has the pace to guard against counter attacks and sort of chase back when needed. If the opposition are counter attacking. So even with Walker here, he can go outside, he can underlap and all of that. If it's Cancelo on the opposite flank, he'll usually come inside rather than staying wide, because it'll again be the winger, whoever it is on the left, Grealish, Sterling, whoever it may be, providing the width there. And the arrows are just indicative of this type of movement that you can see from the players. And it's not fixed. Depending on where the ball is and what they want to do, you can have players going one way or the other. So I'll just sort of try and illustrate this here, for example. I've got player names, and you can make a better.
And maybe
Yes,
with this, as you're showing this, it'd be nice to show, if you could show us a typical move from City, which we have seen through the years, and how that plays out, which is basically, if you notice, a lot of City's goals and the goals they score are tap-ins.
Yep.
There's an overlapping run. There's someone who squares the ball, and it's always a tap-in. You see tons of those goals. So how does that play? It'd be nice to see that, really, a situation like that. It happens all the time.
That's become a trademark City goal, that either a fullback or a winger sort of gets to the byline somewhere around here.
And that's very interesting, right? Because we talk about their fullbacks moving centrally, but still you end up seeing them on the byline getting that ball across many a times for a tap-in. So it'd be nice to see how that plays out. Yeah.
Yeah, I can try and show that. So that's, as you said, it's become a trademark City goal, where
signature
cut back across the 6-yard box, and then whoever's at the far post, whether it's a winger or the striker, whoever sort of taps it in. So okay, let me sort of try and build this up here. So I've got the opposition here in a standard sort of 4-4-2. I'm not going to move them around too much. In a standard 4-4-2 out of possession, they're sort of trying to cut off space centrally, which is what a lot of teams try to do against City. But Uh, yeah. So where's the ball? Yeah. So what happens here is usually you'll see, say, if it's this lineup where you've got De Bruyne, Gundogan over here, they'll try and pick up positions here. You've got Fernandinho or Rodri, whoever it may be over here, Ruben Diaz, Emerick Laporte here. Edison actually plays a pretty active role in possession, so he actually can, you know, play these
Take
sort of
balls, yeah.
passes. He can play long balls. He's really good with sort of playing longer, very accurate long passes, so that can help bypass a lot of the opposition
Well,
and
the
find players
extra
in space
men,
as
the
well.
extra men on the
Yep,
field.
Yeah,
yep, yep.
and then uh, at times you'll have Walker playing here as a sort of, staying central. At times you'll have him overlapping. So now actually, if you look at the game that City played against Norwich, where they beat Norwich 5-0 a couple of weeks ago, they scored I think 2 or 3 goals from the exact same move, which is what we spoke about, where it's a winger getting across and crossing. Now, it was actually Bernardo Silva who was playing here rather than De Bruyne, but I'm not changing that here.
Yep.
Just the role stays the same no
The
matter who the
concept is
player
the
is.
same. Yep, yep.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. So what they were doing is you've got, say, Gundogan sort of coming in here, drifting inside. You've got Fernandinho here. Grealish was playing that game, so he was here. Now, the movement of this player was extremely important because what was happening was that this player, Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne, whoever it may be, was coming deep. And
Okay.
that was drawing whoever the player over here, sorry, this one,
Yep,
the
Martin.
opposition sort of left-sided central midfielder.
yep,
This guy drops off here. He comes out here. So then that leaves space over here because you, if the wide man usually is not. I mean, in the Norwich game wasn't that central. He was a little bit more wide.
yep,
Walker was stepping up here. Jesus was the wide man. You've got Torres here. Torres was sort of making a double movement as well, where he was coming here, drawing one defender out, and then quickly darting into the space that had been created. So those sort of
yep,
double movements are also very, very crucial to the way Pep sets his team up and the roles that he asks his players to play, where they go one way, which
And
obviously
send the
means that the
defender
player
the other.
follows them, and then that creates the space where they then dart into it. So that's
yep.
what Torres did eventually, but if so, just a second. Yeah. So what, as I was saying, what was happening was that De Bruyne was dropping off. He was following him. He was over here trying to track Jesus. But because this space was opened up, both Torres could sort of run into this space. Jesus was able to sort of run in here as well because the fullback is also drawn out.
Yep.
The ball and Walker had all the time in the world to pick out this. Excuse me. Yeah, Walker had all the time in the world to pick out this pass. Jesus
Okay.
was able to come in here. Torres had by then made this run. Grealish or Sterling, whoever may be on the left, also sort of makes the run in here at the far post. So that's the goal that Grealish scored basically, where
Yep.
the ball, Jesus had got past and he crossed the ball. The Norwich defenders had gotten back. One of them sort of got a deflection. It hit Grealish, went in. But the space was basically created by this player's movement because
Got
he
it. Very
drops
interesting.
off,
Yeah.
which forces the opposition to follow him. That then creates this sort of space over here.
Which why the
And then
fullback tucks
that
in
ball
the
is played.
fullback tucks in a little bit, is it? Because of that, and then you have the room
Yeah.
to play that ball wide.
A lot of
Yep.
holes
And,
were
and
found
Jesus
in between.
basically
Yeah.
and Jesus was basically making this run from like outside to inside
Yeah.
and crossing. So Torres scored a goal like this. Uh, Grealish scored a goal like this, and I think I can't remember. There was another goal. I think Sterling when he came on the second half.
And it's not
He
just
scored a similar
Norwich,
goal.
right? It's not just Norwich, right? It happens to so many teams. Let me ask
Yeah,
a very
Against
quick.
it's the
Arsenal?
same.
Let me ask a very
Against
quick
Arsenal.
question, and I think this will, yeah, against Arsenal as well. And I think this will lead into the conversation about Klopp as well and how he tackles the situation with City, or how his teams play and defend and play against City as well. But very quickly, this happens so often with City. Why is the team not able to stop this?
And I also have a question to that,
Why
Harshal,
is the
if you don't
team
mind.
never able to stop this? Because it happens every game.
And I also have a question because
Yeah, yeah.
based on this, right? What Hari is saying, yes, that's one part of it. The other part of it, City has done it so many times, but rarely, very rarely, you'll see a City attacker getting caught offside.
No, because that's extremely good coaching. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Um, Look at Raheem Sterling. Sterling, when he joined City from Liverpool, he was obviously a hugely exciting, talented young player. One of people were excited about him as one of the sort of best upcoming English players coming through. But there was also recognition of the fact that one of the biggest weaknesses in his game was his finishing. That he would struggle to finish even when sent through one on one or in good goal scoring positions. And look at him now, what, 4, 5 seasons under Pep? He last season was a bit of an aberration, but other than that, I think he's averaged about 12 to 15 goals a season. At times, he's gone past that as well, and he's become a pretty good, reliable goal scorer. And a lot of that is down to Pep's coaching, to the extent that there are anecdotes about the initial sort of training sessions that Pep took for City with Sterling there. He On the training ground, he basically painted a white dot on the pitch. So whatever your full size pitch that you're training on, Pep painted a white dot and told Sterling that you're going to stand here when the ball is at that. This is where you're going to be in whatever ABC, whatever phases of play. Say the first two phases of play when the ball is in the defensive or middle third for City, you're going to stand here. This is on the pitch. This is where you're going to be. You're not going to move from here. Only when the ball goes into the final third do you sort of make this sort of run. If until then you're going to stay here, you're going to stay wide, not going to move from here. Why? Because again, as I said, it forces this guy to come out here. So then it opens up the space for whoever your number 10 or sort of left-sided midfielder is to come in and run in here. If he doesn't, great, because then when the ball gets to you, by the time he comes here, you can get past. You've got the time to turn and receive and run past. But just the attention to detail or the how specific Guardiola is with things is he literally painted a white dot on the training pitch and told Sterling that this is where you stand here. This is where you need to be. So it's that to answer your question, that is basically why you'll see even City players not getting caught offside, because they time their runs so well, and that's all down to the work they do on the training ground. They time their runs so well because they've been doing it day in and day out, and they practice it day in and day out, and it's almost muscle memory. It's almost automatic as to when they need to make their runs, because there are triggers in terms of when De Bruyne gets the ball here, for example, in this sort of inside right position.
They know where to run.
He makes these fantastic sort of crosses
balls
and passes
through, yeah.
from here. But the moment he gets on the ball here, whoever's the central striker knows the run he needs to make. Whoever's out here knows the run he needs to make. Whoever's out here knows the run he needs to make. So it's all very well choreographed, and that's why you'll see them, get caught offside very rarely. And also, to be honest, another reason for that is that you'll very rarely see teams play a high line against City, because they'll drop deep. They don't want to give up space behind the defensive line. You can have all the ball you want over here. You can have all the space here. They don't want to give up space behind the defensive line. So automatically, obviously, when you're not playing a high line, when you're playing a deep defensive line, there isn't space to run into behind, in the sense that you're not going to be caught offside that often, because there aren't too many runs being made in that sort of situation in the first place.
Got it. And to be honest, and I'm sure this leads, I mean, obviously we're pressed for time as well, so we're going to lead into the Klopp discussion very quickly now. But when it comes to this, very quickly, Harshal, I know it works like autopilot here, but why is no one able to stop those simple tap-in goals? If it happens regularly every year, shouldn't a team be wiser to those moves by now, an opposition team? And why is it so difficult to stop?
Yeah, it's as you said, it's the classic thing of, what City are going to do, but you still can't stop it. But as I said, it's because of the movement and it's because of the rotations. Because so as I said, because you've got one player dropping off here, what do you do? Again, it's the dilemma
it's a catch-22. I suppose a catch-22, because if that midfielder doesn't move out to De Bruyne, there's a chance that De Bruyne could whip a ball in as well.
Exactly.
Which gives you another problem. So it's a catch-22 they're caught in. Either way you go and you're dead, basically, essentially. There's no way out.
I'll just do a theoretical sort of example here. So this is actually quite similar to the shape you can expect to see Cancelo sort of also coming inside playing here, Walker staying wide. So as you said, if De Bruyne is getting on the ball here, if this guy stays here, he's got all the time in the world to whip a ball like that, and you don't want to give De Bruyne that sort of space. So either he goes across, but if he goes across, I have a simple pass in here, and then he can drop off, or he can say, come in here. Cancelo often comes very central, as I said. So Fernandinho will come in here. He's got the ball now. Now what do you do? Do you ask him to press here? Okay, I can move the ball back here. I can move the ball back here. Now this guy comes. I need to shut him down. But he's got all the time in the world. He's got all the time and space in the world. Now, say if Jesus comes here, this guy has to come in here, because this guy can't do this, because if he also comes in here, he's free.
It's open.
He stays here. He comes in here. And that means that I can make this run in here. So De Bruyne can play this pass here.
Yep.
If he doesn't, he can move out here or wherever, just close by. And that means that he can make this run in here.
Yeah.
At the same time, this man can move in here. Same sort of decisional dilemmas for the opposition here. Do I follow him? If I follow him, he's got space to do this. If I stay, he can run off me and sort of make it into the box, and I have to drop off, and then that leaves space in here. It's just the multiple decisional dilemmas that every player
and I think we can sum this up really well, actually, Harshal. It comes across very simple, right? It's the variety of play. Even though this happens regularly, it's because there's a variation. There's an opportunity. There's also an option that those guys could play a diagonal ball or a through ball or a cross-field ball in. So how it's a dilemma that the opposition is caught in, right? They've got to make a decision one way or the other, and both ways you're essentially screwed both ways, isn't it?
Yep. And I know with press for time we'll move on to Klopp as well, but just another thing about how City sort of when they're building up from the back. So if you look at this image, when Edison has the ball, you've got the two centre backs splitting here. You've got, and this is actually a template from when I had done an article on the Champions League final, or preview of the Champions League final of Chelsea versus City, and what Chelsea could do to stop them, or what they might try to do. But again, if you look at it here, Edison has the ball, the two centre backs are here. The problem is, again, it's because why are City able to play out from the back as well so easily? Because of the positions that the players take up. Now, look at the options Edison has. He can play it short here, he can play it short here. But okay, Chelsea have got two forwards marking them, so I can't do that. So then Fernandinho or Rodri drops in as well over here. And if you leave him free, he can play it to him. But if the midfielder goes and presses him as well, now this guy is free over here. Edison has the passing range to find him directly.
And I think that's the key, right? You're playing off from the back, that Edison has that range. So you can press as much as you want, but he can play a crossfield. He can play a chip pass. I've seen him play a number of chip passes out to the flanks and up top as well. So I think that's the key, right? The fact that he's such a ball-playing goalkeeper.
Yep. And he's extreme, as you said, he's really good at it, and he can play a variety in short passes, long passes really accurately. So again, even in build-up, it all boils down to them City trying to isolate players, trying to find gaps in this manner, and then say, like, if he plays this pass, this guy has then got a huge space to run into, because this player has to cover for either both him and him. So if he gets drawn out here, he can pass it here, and so on and so forth. So, as I said, it's just a lot of a lot of decisions that the opposition need to make, and it's a trade-off that if I stop this from happening, if I stop
something else is going to happen.
So you need to, it's a case of working out what do you want. Do you want them to have the ball in this part of the pitch, or do you want them to have the ball in a different part of the pitch? What players get on the ball? So it's a dynamic sort of situation that teams.
And I'll add one more thing before we jump into the Klopp discussion. Right? I think it's also the quality of that team, right, or the quality of those individuals. Because you can see some teams. What you could do is you can say, listen, we'll give him space. He's a bigger danger for us. We'll close him out. We're willing to give him space. But with City, you can't do that because everyone is quality. You give anyone space, and they're going to kill you.
One of the biggest examples. Go on. Sorry, Al.
No, I say everyone has pace. So basically, pace on the fullbacks are a prerequisite for City. It's like you need to have extensive amount of pace to actually be able to take on this kind of role. So that's why I see happening all the time. Yeah.
One of the biggest examples of what you said is United and Van Bissaka. I mean, um, opposition sort of teams have figured out that Van Bissaka is not that great on the ball, so they
So
leave him
you're
free.
willing to have him have the ball, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
care if Van Bissaka's on the ball; he's not going to hurt us. But if Luke Shaw gets on the ball, if Maguire gets on the ball,
Yeah.
Fernandes, Pogba, these guys get on the ball, then obviously they're going to hurt us. Van Bissaka, it's fine, let him have the ball. So it's as you said, teams work that sort of thing out and try to base their strategy based on that. But with City, who are you okay having letting on the ball? So as you said,
My
it's a
God.
case of top-notch quality across the board, and then add to that the strategy that they use.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. That was really good, man. Now we've got to talk about Jurgen Klopp. This is the part I've been waiting for as a Liverpool fan. So, essentially, to see how Klopp goes about his business and how his Liverpool team plays. So, I know you have some visuals to show here as well. How the Liverpool team plays, and obviously, I have some questions on that as well, as opposed to how a Klopp City team plays, and essentially how Klopp has been able to get the better of that same Man City team we speak about with all those qualities. Klopp has got a lot of success out of it, and how he goes about doing that. So yeah, let's jump straight into that one,
Yeah.
Harshal.
So while I did the sort of intro into Guardiola, I also spoke a little bit about Klopp and the sort of heavy metal gegenpressing style of football he has,
Yep,
which, as I said, so he's said this that gegenpressing is the best playmaker out there.
playmaker. Yep,
You don't need a 100 million number 10 to create chances.
Yeah.
Gegenpressing will do that for you because if you lose the ball and you try and win it back immediately, 5 seconds, 7 seconds within you losing the ball in advanced areas of the pitch, because again, higher up the pitch is where you're more likely to lose the ball because that's where you're trying to make more
Yeah.
risky passes, you're trying to create chances. And if you win the ball back in those areas, obviously it's a lot easier for you to create chances. And that's sort of the base for his entire approach. The moment he came in at Liverpool, he's from then up until now, he's tried to build that. He's obviously tempered it at times, as I said, Guardiola has, even Klopp has been adaptable. It's not, especially over the last, I'd say, 18 months or so, because of COVID, because of the the physical demands on players. It's not as intense a press as we used to see earlier, but it's targeted. It's there are Liverpool pick their moments on when to press, and when they do it, more often than not, they win the ball back. So I have an example here, or a couple of examples here from the game against Real Madrid in the Champions League last season. I think it's the game at Anfield.
Yeah.
Just from the first few minutes of the game, just the couple of pressing instances that we saw from Liverpool. So yeah, this is actually obviously game footage. Now, first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. Now, Liverpool do something known as a man-oriented press, where each of Liverpool's players pick up an opposition player and sort of press him or mark him based on where the ball is. The alternative to this is a ball oriented press where you basically target your players to where the ball is. It doesn't matter which player has the ball, in the sense, obviously you target it in an effective manner and in an intelligent manner. And one great example of this is the way RB Leipzig play. For example, Julian Nagelsmann, now he's gone to Bayern Munich, but when he was at RB Leipzig, Jesse Marsch, who has now taken over from him at RB Leipzig, who was RB Salzburg manager. These guys use a ball-oriented approach where, say, if the ball is out on the left, you'll have 4 or 5 players sort of converging, not on the ball as such, but say 2 players on the ball and 3 other players blocking off passing options. Liverpool use a man-oriented approach now, most usually. So look at this example here. Courtois has the ball. He's been forced into a sort of clearance. The ball comes back to him, and he's sort of forced to kick it like this because look at the options that he has. Eder Militao, Mane is tracking him. If he makes the pass here, Mane is onto him. Federico Valverde, the number 15, if he makes the pass here. Milner, look at Milner's body positioning and just look at how he's waiting to see where the ball is going. He's
Yeah.
literally, he's crouched and he's ready to pounce. If the ball comes here, he's ready to pounce on Valverde. Uh, Firmino can drop off and pick up Tony Cruz, but he's also sort of, his body is he's using his body to shadow Casemiro. So the way his body is positioned, Courtois can't pass to Casemiro because literally Firmino's in the way. Same thing with Wijnaldum. He's picking up Cruz, but he can move out to, I think it's Nacho there, if the ball goes out there. So what does Courtois do? The only free player over here is the left back, Ferland Mendy. He tries to pass to him.
Yeah.
Look what happens then. The moment the ball goes here, whoever was at right back, I think it was Alexander Arnold. Alexander Arnold has raced up to challenge him. Wijnaldum's also dropped off to challenge him. And another thing, now look at what Liverpool's press has done. Initially, just because of the way Liverpool are pressing, Cruz has had to drop in deep. Now, when the ball's gone here,
it's empty in the middle of the park.
Exactly. Ideally, you wanted Cruz to be here.
So there's no passing option for Mendy, essentially.
Exactly, and he gives the ball. That's literally what happened here. He tried to make a pass here. He did miss-kick it as well. So he miss-kicked it, and there was nobody else there to receive it. And I think Wijnaldum picked up the ball, and Liverpool had an attack. So
the two
you see, this is what I mean.
Let me stop you here for a second. Yeah, Harshal. Two questions that pop to mind. Two things that pop up to mind with this is brilliant, right? One is it comes across almost like it's a planned approach by Liverpool. They knew they created the situation where they knew Courtois' only option was to go to Mendy and Trent and Wijnaldum were already on their bike. So they created a situation. It was planned situation or scenario
to perfection
to force Courtois to make that pass out of Mendy, and then Trent and Wijnaldum were bang on their bike. The other thing that comes
and that's the thing. Sorry, go on.
And the other thing that sticks to mind here is to play this way, you've got to have ultra fit players because you're sprinting. Your initial burst of sprint to get to that player has got to be really, really quick. So you've got to have strong hamstrings. Obviously, you've got to be extremely fit to be able to make that burst of speed sprints to get really quickly to someone to close them down. Is that a fair point?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So to the first point that you said, now Courtois actually is not the best goalkeeper with his feet. He's good, but he's not. He can get a little rushed at times. He's prone to making, or he's prone to misplacing passes. And Ferland Mendy is also not that great on the ball. So Liverpool have sort of targeted it here to, as I said, they've left Mendy open as the only passing option here, right? There's nobody close by. So Courtois sees him open. He tries to pass to him. But the moment Courtois makes that pass, Alexander Arnold is on his bike and he's pressing him. Because players who are poor on the ball, they will obviously under pressure make mistakes, and that's what he makes. He makes a mistake here and gives the ball up, and there's nobody here because these guys have been drawn deep. So it is planned. And then coming to the second point that he said about fitness, if you remember when Klopp came in, one of the players who became and he was already a pretty important player for Liverpool, but he became, I think, when he was fit, he used to play every game almost the first couple of seasons, was Adam Lallana. Lallana was. He was an absolute pressing machine. He'd come from Southampton under Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino is also someone who favors a really high press, so he was used to those demands, and he straight away slotted into Klopp's team. And because he was already used to the sort of physical demands in terms of stamina, in terms of his fitness levels, and the rest of the team caught up. So. And overall, yes, the Liverpool side over the last 3 seasons or so have been, in terms of fitness, they've been up there. You need to have that to be able to press in this manner. And I'll just move on to another really good example of the press that I was talking about from the same match about a couple of minutes later. This time, it's from a goal kick. It's not open play. But you can see Courtois plays the ball short to Eder Militao. Again, look at the positioning of the players. You've got Salah on Nacho. You've got Firmino on Casemiro. The moment the ball is played out, Mane is pressing Militao. And Milner, again, look at him. He's waiting.
Crouching.
He's ready.
Waiting,
He's crouching and he's waiting. He's ready. The moment the pass is made, he'll pass. And look at Firmino as well. He's pointing to to the other Liverpool player to push forward, which I'll show in the next image. So this is how it sets up. Now, and Militao gets the ball again. Just looking at this image, and given that he's a centre back, he's decent on the ball, but not great. This is the only passing option he has, which is Valverde over here, number 15. He can't really make a pass anywhere else. So Liverpool have sort of baited him into making this pass. The moment they do that, look at Milner.
Milner's on him.
This is 5 seconds later.
Look at that
he
sprint.
he
Yeah, look at that
he
sprint from
receives the
everyone. Yeah.
ball here. He receives the ball here, but because Milner closes him down, he can't open his body up. So ideally, you want to open your body up when you're receiving this. So you want to return while you're receiving it on your right foot, so that you can push it and then run onto the right flank, right?
Yep.
But because Milner comes across and presses him, he forces him infield. He forces him behind, closes off. He forces Valverde to close his body position and turn and go infield. So because he's done that, now he can't pass forward, and Milner's
Yep.
anyway there. He's blocking off the
No
pass.
choice but to pass it backwards.
Now, no, he can't pass it backwards either. Can he pass it
Yep,
backwards?
yep,
Yeah.
Mane is blocking the pass to
yep.
Militao.
Yep.
Firmino is gesturing to Fabinho to press. I mean, not to press as such, but to push forward. If you look here, he's gesturing to a player outside of shot. That player was Fabinho, because Modric was dropping to offer a passing option for Valverde, but Fabinho's pushed up and closed that down. Firmino is waiting. He's ready. If the pass is made in field, he can intercept. Salah's over here as well. The only thing he can do is try and play an ambitious pass over here. Like the only I wouldn't even say it's not risky. It is, of course, risky, but the only open players there are Tony Cruz and absolutely on the other side of the line, Colin Mendy. But
Yep.
like, even if you just on the edge over here, you can see a little bit of a red color over here. There is a Liverpool player over here. So
Ready
if the
to
ball
ready
is
to pounce.
passed,
Ready to pound on Cruz.
exactly. So what Valverde, I don't remember exactly what happened, but Liverpool did win the ball back over here. Either I think he tried to pass infield and it was intercepted. So you can see the sort of pressing traps that Liverpool lay over here.
Yeah. This is extremely awesome, man. Just a very quick point, right? Just to again, like I said, very quickly analyze how a typical Liverpool team sets up and moves the ball forward. Let's say against City or against any other team for that matter. Because there's always the question. There are two things that pop up in my one is that the front three, right? Everyone talks about Firmino and how they work, and Firmino drops deep and allows those other two to cut in, which is a very different approach to how City play may be. And also, one other point I want to quickly highlight was the Trent Alexander-Arnold being a playmaker right back, right? He's such a different right back. He does everything he's a Xabi Alonso for Liverpool playing from the right. So how does that work? Those two things, if you could help us address, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's actually, I'd say, him and Kevin De Bruyne are two of the best passers in the Premier League at the moment. Just in terms of the way in which they can the everything, vision, quality of the pass, weight of the pass, those sort of curved crosses into the box that are so difficult to defend against.
Crossfield balls into the strikers, essentially. Yeah.
Not just the strikers, Alexander-Arnold and Robertson and Andy Robertson sort of play crossfield passes to each other all the time.
Yeah.
So now with Liverpool, the thing is, now with City also obviously do exploit the wide areas, but their focus is to try and get as much done or try and get their focus of using the wide areas is to open up the central spaces and then try and attack from
the
there.
half spaces. Yep.
Yeah, Liverpool are more. I think Liverpool. The way I'd like to put it is Liverpool are more direct in terms of their use of the wide spaces. They're very happy to use the wide spaces and create attacks from there. So this is. I'm going to sort of show you what Liverpool are doing in possession this season, and the use of Harvey Elliott. Harvey Elliott has come into the team and he started. Is extremely interesting because it opens up some really interesting rotations that Liverpool are doing on the right. So again, typical sort of setup. You've got Matip, Van Dijk, Fabinho, Alisson over here.
They play the high line, obviously. Yep.
Yeah. So what happens in possession is Alexander-Arnold comes inside, and what was happening in earlier seasons, till last season,
he would go on the outside. Yep.
No, not that he would go on the outside. No, wait, I'll change this to for now. Say this is Gini Wijnaldum.
Yep.
He'd be on the left side of the midfield trio. Jordan Henderson would be on the right. So
exactly. Yep.
What would happen is Henderson would go and play almost as sort of right back / right-sided centre back to give Alexander-Arnold the freedom to move forward. Now, Alexander-Arnold could overlap, Salah could come inside, or Alexander-Arnold would be the one coming inside, Salah would stay wide. Again, same principle.
Yep.
If he stays out, he has to go out. This creates space. I can make the run here. He can make the run here, whatever.
Yep.
If he stays narrow, he has the space. Or if he comes inside and stays narrow, Alexander-Arnold has all the world all the time in the
Yeah.
world to do this.
The cross,
So
yeah.
now Firmino also dropping deep does the same thing, pulls opposition defenders out, so that this sort of run can be made, so that Mane can then make this sort of run.
Yeah.
The thing is, with the difference, one of the differences between Liverpool and City is that City's midfield, with that midfield three, the two number 10s being used and all of that, they're really trying to create chances from there. Those two players are going to be massively involved in chance creation.
Yep.
The Liverpool approach is one where the fullbacks are the guys who are massive, who are the playmakers. The
Yep.
midfield is essentially just trying to sort of set the platform for that, and
They're plugging gaps essentially, right? They're plugging gaps, plugging holes, and they're very functional.
Off the ball
exactly.
runs, more or less.
It's
Yeah.
a not even no. I wouldn't even say off the ball runs. I'd say basically it's, as Hari said, it's a functional midfield. It's their job is to just recycle possession out to the wide flank, to the wide areas, to the fullbacks, and then have these guys getting into the box and getting on the end of chances and all of that. Because ideally, what Liverpool try to do is create a front five of this sort, so that then you have then a back three like this. You've got Fabinho sort of central and Wijnaldum sort of moving across wherever needed, at least until last season. So you've got a front five over here with 4 defenders and 5 attackers. There will always be space somewhere. Even if they go man to man, there will always be space somewhere. So that's what Liverpool tried to do. Now, as you said, midfield is very functional. Chance creation comes from the flanks. They've sort of doubled down on this approach to an extent.
Harvey Elliott. Yeah.
With Harvey Elliott, but the thing is that Elliott is playing in midfield, which is quite interesting because he's actually a winger. But I mean, the only place he can wait, who did I change?
Henderson
Wijnaldum,
moves to the left.
Yeah. So the only place he has is in midfield, because I mean, if he wants to play in his preferred position or whatever, if on the right wing, he's barely going to get a game because Salah is going to start most games.
Yep.
But he's basically playing on the right of the midfield, and what he is doing is now Henderson is now gone. Henderson's actually been playing on the left of the midfield trio. Elliott is going wide and providing width. He's the one staying wide, which is now allowing Alexander-Arnold to play almost as a midfielder. Salah is staying central. I mean, he comes in field anyway. So now, obviously, Elliott has the space if Alexander-Arnold wants to pass. If this guy is going across to cover,
You can push the ball
you've got
forward.
all this space over here. And we've actually seen Alex in the 3 games so far. You'll if you go back and watch them, Alexander-Arnold has been getting a lot of space in this sort of area, the right half space, to make this sort of pass. And it's a very Kevin De Bruyne-esque position. And
I was going to say, right, it's essentially what he's trying to do is, you just said the thing earlier, right? They're both of them are the best passers. They're very similar, Kevin De Bruyne and Alexander-Arnold, with their delivery and their passing skills. Essentially, what Klopp is trying to do is trying to create a De Bruyne there, isn't it? He's trying to get Alexander-Arnold to occupy De Bruyne-like positions on the field from the right and moving in, and using Elliott to take up the wide spot, essentially pull wide, essentially, or pull the opposition fullbacks wide.
Absolutely. So Alexander-Arnold is one of the best players in the league, in my opinion, especially in possession. Fantastic. You want to try and get him on the ball in as much as possible, and you want to try and get him on the ball in this sort of in the right half space, because this is from where he can cause a lot of damage. He can pass to Salah if he's making the run in, Firmino, Mane, sort of even crossfield ball to Robertson making a run in here, and then Robertson can sort of cut it back to Firmino or whoever or Salah.
And he can take shots from distance as well.
He can take shots.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Klopp is basically trying to maximize Alexander-Arnold's sort of strengths, and then at the back again, Fabinho can drop in here and form a back 3. He's done that. Henderson is dropping in, forming a back 3. So you've still got that 3-man plus a defensive midfielder there to provide that defensive security if things break down. And the thing with Elliott is, because he's a winger, you can always also pass to him, and he can carry it down the flank and cross as well if needed.
Yep.
So it's giving Liverpool a lot of potential rotations here. Salah can stay out wide,
and Elliott can come in as well. Yep.
And Elliott can come in. That's also been happening. A little bit, where this sort of thing is happening. So it's giving Liverpool a lot of rotations. It's giving them another sort of weapon that the opposition, exactly, it's a dynamic that the opposition now have to deal with. And but overall, as I said, Liverpool rely a lot on the wide areas. They rely the fullbacks are the playmakers. I mean, if you look back at data from the last 3 or 4 seasons, Alexander Arnold and Robertson have, like, I think uh,
Some of the best
30,
assists in the
30, 40 odd assists combined,
Yep.
if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken.
And now,
More
and
than
now
that,
with
probably.
Jota coming in, of course, I think he provides a lot more goals for Liverpool. So I think he
Yep.
could also, in place of Firmino, because Firmino doesn't score that much. He has not been scoring that much. So with Jota coming in, it's an added ammunition for Liverpool
I
to
think
score
Jota
more
is
goals.
a very direct player, and he makes
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
right runs. Very
yeah,
different
yeah,
player to Firmino, right? He makes very
So
good runs,
yeah.
whereas
So
Firmino
as
drops deeper. Yep.
yeah,
yeah,
Firmino is your classic false nine. He'll drop deep to pull
yeah.
opposition players out of position and create space. Jota is the guy because he is a winger essentially, but he gets played in central positions. He'll sort of, always look to run in behind. And then there are rotations that happen. Jota goes out wide, Salah plays centrally,
Yeah.
or he'll go out to the left. Mane sometimes plays centrally. It's usually Salah who comes central, but yeah, with Jota, it's a case of making runs in behind. And I mean, let's not forget, this is just sort of one template. Now, if you don't have Henderson, you've got Thiago,
Yeah.
who's one of the
Thiago.
best midfielders in the world. If this guy gets on the pitch and if he gets on the ball, he can control the game easily. He'll make those passes that pull you know the opposition out of position, and then he can make these sort of passes as well. He can do
Right. Yeah.
everything there. Naby Keita has also been playing really well. So
Yep.
got Keita there who can provide a goal threat because he gets into the box. So if you've got Keita, then you might play Fabinho and maybe I'd say Henderson or Milner to provide a little bit more uh, defensive solidity
Defense. Yep. Yep.
because Keita gets in. But that's what Klopp has different midfielders there. He's got Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, who's similar to Keita in a little bit. So
Lots of options basically. Lots of
which
options
he
in that
can
part of the pitch.
change,
Yeah.
he can chop and change, he can, depending on the opposition, depending on the profile of each player and what sort of midfield he wants, what he wants each player to do. So again, it's a very system-based approach where there's a defined way of playing. There are roles that each player sort of fulfills, and then you see, okay, if I want my wide player, because the opposition has a weakness in so and so area, so I want my winger to be doing this. Now, if I want my winger to be doing this, who are the players who can do that? Maybe it's Harvey Elliott on the day, so I'll play him there, or it's Salah today, so I'll play Salah there. I'll play someone else in midfield. So that chopping and changing does happen, but the overall approach stays the same. There are just the chopping and changing happens in terms of changing the sort of details or the intricacies within that overall system that I
Uh,
just sort of showed.
I agree 100%, man. I think it's very similar to City. People just drop into positions because they know their roles, right? I mean, this was extremely insightful, Harshal. I
Yep.
mean, it's just a pity we have been pressed for time, but this was
Yep.
extremely
Yeah,
insightful just to get the two perspectives. And I mean, just before we go, right? Just before we go, because it's been awesomely insightful. As a Liverpool fan, I'd just like to get a quick one from you. What are your thoughts so far on Harvey Elliott? He's a bit of a breakout star. Klopp really trusts him. What are your thoughts on the man so far from what you've seen of him and the potential he has?
I am extremely impressed. So actually, I think it was in March or April of this year when I was still working with Total Football Analysis that I did a scout report on Elliott because he was doing extremely well in the championship for Blackburn. I think he ended the season with
7 goals,
I don't
11
know,
assists, I think. Yeah, seven
something
goals,
around
11
that. Yeah,
assists. Yep,
11, 12
yep.
odd assists. And he was playing as a winger for them, but he was doing extremely well. So I did a report on him, and at that time, I remember writing that with Jurgen Shaqiri most probably likely to leave Liverpool this summer, Elliott is the kind of player who can play that Shaqiri role in terms of being a playmaker in the midfield. Because otherwise, as you said, the midfield three is quite functional with
Yep.
Wijnaldum, Fabinho, and Henderson, which was the sort of first choice midfield trio over the last 2 years or so. It's a very functional midfield. Their job was to try and get the ball forward to the fullbacks and protect the defense. Obviously, try and create where possible, but the primary role was to do sort of facilitate and try and get the ball to Robertson and Alexander Arnold. When Shaqiri used to play, he used to provide a little bit of a playmaking option from midfield. So I thought Elliott could do that for them because he's again left-footed, plays off the right, has a similar profile in terms of his build, in terms of how he runs with the ball, all of that. So he has, I think, taken up that role in the squad, but I didn't think he'd be used in this manner where he'd come into midfield, but he's basically acting in a way to create space for Alexander Arnold. But at the same time, he's also, when he's been on the ball, he's done really well. He's made some excellent runs on the ball. He's made some brilliant passes. So he's fit in. He's just 18, and that's what scares me
Yeah.
as a United fan, in the sense that he's just 18 years old and he's already doing so well.
Maturing
And
in that.
yeah, and another young player I forgot about, Curtis Jones. He broke
Yeah.
through last season.
Yeah.
He will play quite. I hope he plays quite a bit, because I was
He's a
also quite
fabulous player.
impressed.
He's a fabulous player as well. Yeah.
I was quite impressed with him last season. So Elliot, obviously, he's done a fantastic job so far. Excuse me, I'm still waiting to see if he sort of keeps his place after the international break. I think it'll depend on what teams Liverpool are playing, because I'm sure Klopp will want to start Thiago in a few games. With the
Then you
Champions
got
League starting,
Naby Keita as well, who's done well so far. So yeah, I
Keita
think
had a really good preseason.
Yeah.
And I think the games he's played in the Premier League, couple of games or whatever, he did well. And with the Champions League starting, rotation will happen. So obviously he's not going to play every game. There will be rotation, but as I said earlier, Liverpool have a variety of midfielders capable of playing different roles. Just depends on what sort of configuration Klopp wants to use on that particular day against that particular whoever the opponent is. But yeah, Elliot, very, very impressed so far, and I'm looking forward to see what he can do.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's great. Awesome.
Arshal, thanks a lot for this, man. This has been really, really insightful.
I think it's
guys,
one of the best we've had on the show so far. I mean, lots
best
of
tactical analysis
Yeah,
and insight. It's been
yeah.
absolutely, and like I said, I think everyone has been just keen. I know a lot of viewers are keen. I myself have been keen to see the differences between the two sides, right, and the way the two sides operate, the two managers operate. So really, really insightful. Ram, over to you, man.
Of course, Harshal, once again, thank you for coming on the show. Now, of course, we know how City and Liverpool play. We should give a call to Ole. Tell him what to do.
That's a different episode. Trying to figure out what Oli wants to do is a different episode altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm of course, very excited for the games to be back after the international week. Harshal, thank you so much for sparing
Absolutely.
some time for us. It's been an absolute amazing hour, and of course, we look forward to have you on the show in the future again. To talk about more insightful and interesting topics as well. So, signing off from the Plot Malaysia, Harshal, you can join us. Yeah, this is the show for the fans.
By the fans.
Bye, fans.
Bye, the
Yeah,
fans.
walk alone, guys.
GGMU, always.